At a family dinner, my girlfriend called me disgusting and said being intimate with me was extremely uncomfortable in front of everyone. So I pulled out my phone and showed them the camera footage of her admitting she only wanted me for my expensive car and money. Hey everyone, my name is David, and this Tuesday morning started like any other. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, carefully adjusting my tie and checking my Tag Heuer watch while mentally calculating my morning schedule. It was 7:30 a.m., which meant Lisa would still be in bed for another hour at least. She had gotten into the habit of sleeping in later ever since her promotion 6 months ago. The new position as senior event coordinator at Premier Events Co. came with longer hours and increasingly demanding clients, but the salary bump was definitely worth it. Combined with my income as a corporate lawyer at the firm, we were finally hitting all the financial goals I had mapped out when we moved in together last year. I grabbed my usual espresso, double shot, no milk, and settled at the kitchen table with my MacBook. The European markets had closed strong overnight, and my investment portfolio was up another 3%. More importantly, the engagement ring fund in my separate account had finally crossed the $18,000 threshold. I had been contributing $600 every month for the past year and a half, meticulously calculating compound interest and market timing to optimize my savings. By my projections, I would have enough for the perfect ring by New Year's, a 3-carat emerald cut from Cartier that would make Lisa's eyes light up the same way they had when she admired similar rings in their window displays during our walks through downtown Miami. "Morning, babe," Lisa mumbled as she shuffled into the kitchen, wearing the satin pajamas I had bought her for Valentine's Day. Her hair was tousled, and she looked adorable in that sleepy way that still made my chest tighten with affection after 2.5 years together. "Good morning, beautiful," I said, looking up from my laptop and noting how the morning light caught the natural highlights in her auburn hair. "Fresh espresso in the machine. I made enough for both of us." She poured herself a cup and added her usual splash of hazelnut cream, leaning against the marble counter as she scrolled through her iPhone. I returned to my analysis of overnight trading patterns, satisfied by the comfortable rhythm of our morning routine. This was exactly what I had always wanted: stability, partnership, and a woman who appreciated the security I could provide. "Any exciting events today?" I asked, genuinely curious about her work. Lisa had a real talent for coordinating perfect celebrations, and I loved hearing her stories about the elaborate weddings and corporate galas she planned. Helping a tech startup plan their product launch party," Lisa replied without looking up from her phone. "They want a rooftop venue with ocean views and premium catering. Must be nice to have that kind of budget." I smiled. "Well, maybe someday we'll be planning our own celebration," I said casually, keeping my tone light because I didn't want to pressure her. But the hint was intentional. I had been gradually introducing the concept of marriage into our conversations, testing the waters. Lisa's responses had been positive. Not enthusiastic exactly, but positive enough. She had even mentioned wanting a destination wedding, and I had already started researching the most exclusive resorts in the Caribbean. "Yeah, maybe," Lisa said, still focused on her screen. "I should get ready. Mrs. Rodriguez wants to discuss her anniversary gala at 10. I watched her move through our penthouse apartment, admiring the space we had created together. Everything was falling into place exactly as I had planned. The lease was up for renewal in 4 months, and I had already spoken to the landlord about upgrading to the larger unit down the hall. It would give us more space for the future we were building together, and the additional square footage would be perfect for when we eventually started a family. My phone buzzed with a text from my law school buddy, Ryan. "Drinks tonight? Haven't seen you in forever, man." I considered it for a moment. I had been working late most nights this week, grinding through case files and client meetings, but Lisa had her weekly game night with the girls tonight anyway, so the timing would work out perfectly. "Lisa, Ryan wants to grab drinks tonight," I called out. "You're doing your thing with the girls, right?" "Yeah, Chloe and I are meeting at 8, Lisa called back from the bedroom, her voice carrying that familiar warmth that always made me smile. I typed back to Ryan. "Sure, see you at O'Malley's at 9. The timing was perfect. We would both have our social time and be back home together later that evening. This was exactly the kind of balanced relationship I had always envisioned. I closed my MacBook and gathered my things for work, feeling that familiar sense of satisfaction wash over me. The ring fund was progressing ahead of schedule. Lisa seemed genuinely content with our life together, and my career was on an upward trajectory that would ensure financial security for decades to come. By every metric that mattered, we were absolutely winning at life. As I kissed Lisa goodbye, she was applying makeup at her vanity, focused and beautiful in the way that still took my breath away sometimes. I felt that surge of pride and contentment that came with knowing I had built something real and lasting. At 30 years old, I had a successful career, a gorgeous girlfriend who appreciated stability over chaos, and a clear path toward the future I wanted. Some of my friends were still chasing drama and uncertainty, jumping from one toxic relationship to another or dating women who thrived on emotional roller coasters. But I had found something better, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine compatibility. Walking to my Tesla, I made a mental note to stop by Cartier during lunch to look at rings in person. New Year's was only 5 months away, and I wanted to be fully prepared when the perfect moment arrived to propose. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan, and I couldn't have been happier with how our life was unfolding. Later that evening, as I was getting ready to meet Ryan, I watched Lisa prepare for her night with Chloe. She seemed excited about their girls' night, and I loved seeing her happy and relaxed. This was what a healthy relationship looked like. Two independent people who chose to build something together while maintaining their own friendships and interests. Have fun tonight, I told her as I grabbed my keys. Don't let Chloe talk you into too much trouble. Lisa laughed and gave me a quick kiss. You know us, just wine and gossip, nothing too scandalous. As I drove toward the bar to meet Ryan, I felt completely secure in what we had built together. 2.5 years of steady progress, financial stability, and genuine partnership. Some people might call it boring, but I called it success. Now, let me tell you about that same evening from my perspective. I'm Lisa, and I watched David leave for his drinks with Ryan at 8:45, waving goodbye from the doorway with what I hoped looked like genuine affection. As soon as his Tesla disappeared down the street, I felt my shoulders relax in a way that had become all too familiar. Don't get me wrong, I love him. I really do. But sometimes I feel like I can't breathe around his constant presence and meticulous planning. Every conversation somehow turns into a discussion about our future trajectory, some new investment opportunity, or another career advancement strategy he's mapped out for us. Even his goodbye kisses feel calculated, like he's checking off a box on his perfect boyfriend checklist. Chloe had texted me earlier. Still on for tonight? I'm bringing Prosecco. I had been looking forward to this evening all week. Chloe was the only person who knew the real me. The person I had been before I decided to become the kind of woman who dated corporate lawyers, planned sensible futures, and attended charity galas with a smile plastered on my face. She had been horrified when I first started dating David, but she had kept her mouth shut about it until now. When Chloe arrived at 8 with 2 bottles of Dom Perignon, I was already halfway through a glass of Chardonnay. She hugged me tightly and settled onto our leather couch, pouring herself a generous glass while eyeing me with the kind of knowing look that only a best friend can give. So, how's life in paradise with Mr. Corporate Lawyer? Chloe asked with a smirk that immediately told me she could see right through my carefully constructed facade. I groaned and took another sip of wine, feeling the alcohol already starting to loosen the tight control I kept on my thoughts during the day. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Chloe's eyebrows shot up with interest. Trouble in paradise. More like I'm losing my fucking mind, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. The relief of finally saying it out loud was immediate and overwhelming. Chloe leaned forward, her eyes bright with the kind of anticipation that comes when your friend is finally ready to admit what you've suspected all along. I stared into my wine, swirling it around the crystal glass David had bought because he thought it was important for us to have quality stemware for entertaining. Where do I even start? I said, taking a deep breath and preparing to unload everything I had been keeping bottled up for months. Remember Jake? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Your ex, the bartender with the motorcycle and the tattoos? Chloe asked, her eyebrows shooting up even higher. The one who used to tie you up and fuck you senseless? Yeah, that one, I said, feeling my cheeks flush just thinking about it. The memory of those nights with Jake still made my pulse quicken in a way that 2.5 years with David never had. God, Chloe, the sex was incredible, I continued, the wine making me bold and reckless with my honesty. He would pin me down and just take what he wanted from me. I would be sore for days afterward and love every second of it. There was this raw intensity, this hunger that made me feel completely alive. Chloe leaned forward even more, her eyes bright with interest and concern. And David? I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in our quiet living room. David asks permission to touch my tits. He literally says, "Is this okay?" every 5 minutes during sex. It's like he's following some corporate training manual on sexual harassment prevention. Jesus Christ, Lisa, Chloe said, shaking her head in disbelief. The worst part is he thinks he's being respectful, I continued, taking a long sip of wine and feeling the alcohol warm my blood. He read some article about enthusiastic consent, and now he treats my body like it's made of fucking glass that might shatter if he's too aggressive. David won't even have sex with the lights on because he thinks it's too intense or something. Chloe was staring at me with a mixture of horror and fascination, like she was watching a car crash in slow motion. "So why are you still with him?" And there it was. The question I had been avoiding for months, the one that kept me awake at night staring at the ceiling while David slept peacefully beside me, completely unaware of the turmoil in my head. "Because Jake was broke," I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat. "He was exciting and incredible in bed, but he couldn't pay his own rent. I was always covering dinner, always lending him money for his motorcycle payments or his bar tab. I got so tired of dating a man-child who lived like he was still in college at 28. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at David's Tesla in the driveway, a car that cost more than Jake made in an entire year. "David has his shit together," I said, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. "He makes more money in a single month than Jake made in 6. He's responsible, he's stable, he's reliable. He wants to marry me and give me a good life with financial security and a beautiful home." "But do you love him?" Chloe asked, her voice gentle but insistent. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of the air conditioning humming and a neighbor's dog barking in the distance. I could feel Chloe's eyes on my back, waiting for an answer I wasn't sure I was brave enough to give. "I love what he represents," I said finally, my voice cracking slightly under the weight of my admission. "I love the security he provides. I love not worrying about money or whether the rent will be paid on time. I love that he'll never cheat on me or disappear for 3 days on a drinking bender with his buddies." "That's not the same thing, Lisa," Chloe said softly. "I know," I replied, tears threatening to spill over. "I know it's not the same thing at all." "But Chloe, I'm 26 years old," I continued, turning away from the window to face her directly. "I'm so fucking tired of dating losers who can't even afford to take me to a decent restaurant. Do you know what it's like to always be the one paying for everything? To have to worry about whether your boyfriend can cover his half of a $30 dinner bill?" I walked back to the couch and collapsed beside her, suddenly feeling exhausted by the weight of my own honesty. "David took me to that new place on Ocean Drive last week, the one where dinner costs $400 for 2 people. He didn't even blink at the bill. He just handed over his Black American Express card like it was nothing." Chloe joined me at the window, her reflection appearing beside mine in the glass. "You settled," she said simply. "I settled," I confirmed, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "I chose financial security over passion. I chose stability over excitement. And now I'm trapped with a man who makes love to me like he's following step-by-step instructions from a fucking manual." "Have you talked to him about it?" Chloe asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "About wanting things to be more intense in the bedroom?" I laughed harshly, the sound echoing off our expensive windows. "Are you kidding me? David thinks dirty talk is whispering 'you're so beautiful' in my ear during missionary position. The kinkiest thing we've ever done is shower sex, and he spent the entire time worried about me slipping and hurting myself on the marble tiles." "So talk to him," Chloe pressed. "Tell him what you actually want." "And say what exactly?" I shot back, my voice rising with frustration. "Hey, honey, I need you to tie me up and fuck me like you hate me, because right now our sex life is literally putting me to sleep." He'd probably have a panic attack and suggest we see a couples therapist. I shook my head, feeling the futility of the situation crash over me like a wave. "Besides, it's not really about technique, Chloe. It's about desire. Jake wanted to devour me. He looked at me like I was something he absolutely had to have. David wants to cherish me and protect me and treat me like I'm made of porcelain." Chloe was quiet for a long moment, processing everything I had just dumped on her. Finally, she asked the question I had been dreading. "What are you going to do?" I looked at my reflection in the window, superimposed over David's pristine Tesla in the driveway. "I don't know," I admitted. "Stay, I guess. Learn to live with it. Maybe have an affair when I can't take the boredom anymore." "Lisa," Chloe said, her voice sharp with concern. "What?" I replied, meeting her eyes directly. "I'm being honest here. I picked stability over passion, and now I have to live with that choice. At least when he proposes, and he will, probably at New Year's, knowing how meticulously he plans everything, I'll have a beautiful ring and a secure future." "And you'll be miserable," Chloe said bluntly. "Maybe," I conceded, "but I'll be financially secure and miserable, which is better than being broke and miserable like I was with Jake." It was Friday evening when I finally got around to my weekly security camera review. Work had been absolutely brutal that week. Back-to-back client meetings, depositions, and a massive case restructuring that kept me at the office until nearly 10 every night. Lisa had been understanding as always, ordering takeout from our favorite Thai place and waiting up for me despite her own demanding schedule coordinating events. I settled into my home office chair with a cold Corona, ready to quickly delete the week's footage and finally get some rest. This was usually mindless work, just fast-forwarding through empty rooms and routine daily activities to clear storage space on our security system. Nothing ever happened worth preserving. I started with Tuesday's footage, quickly scrubbing through the mundane details of our day. When I reached Tuesday evening's files, I saw Lisa greeting Chloe at 8 p.m. sharp with what looked like Prosecco bottles in hand. I almost skipped past it entirely. Just my girlfriend and her sister having a normal evening together while I was out having drinks with Ryan. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the way they were positioned on the couch, leaning toward each other with an intensity that seemed different from their usual casual hangouts. Maybe it was the body language that suggested this wasn't just sisterly small talk. Whatever it was, I found myself rewinding the footage and turning up the audio. "So how's life in paradise with Mr. Corporate Lawyer?" Chloe's voice came through the speakers clearly, and there was something in her tone, a mocking edge that made my stomach tighten with unease. My finger froze over the delete button as Lisa responded, "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." This definitely wasn't casual sister conversation. There was weight behind her words, a seriousness that immediately put me on alert. What followed was 52 minutes of conversation that systematically destroyed everything I thought I knew about my relationship, my girlfriend, and the life we had built together. Lisa's voice, raw and unfiltered by the carefully maintained facade she presented to me every day, confessing that she had chosen me primarily for my financial stability rather than genuine attraction or love. She described our sex life as boring, complained that I wasn't aggressive or dominant enough for her tastes, and admitted that she felt trapped with someone who made love to her like he was following instructions from a manual. Every intimate moment we had shared, every tender gesture I thought had meaning, was dissected and dismissed as inadequate compared to her memories of her ex-boyfriend Jake. I sat in my office chair for 4 hours, replaying different sections of the conversation, trying to process what I was hearing. By the time I finally stood up, my Corona was warm and forgotten on the desk, and I felt like I was going to throw up. 2.5 years, 2.5 fucking years of what I thought was building something real and lasting with someone who genuinely cared about me. 2.5 years of planning our future, saving for an engagement ring, imagining the family we would start together. And the entire time she had been settling for me like I was some kind of consolation prize. The worst part wasn't even the sexual complaints. Though hearing her describe in graphic detail how much more she had enjoyed being with Jake was like a knife twisting in my chest. The worst part was the calculated nature of her choice. She had weighed her options like she was making a business decision, and I had been the safe, boring, financially stable option she had reluctantly chosen over passion and genuine desire. I walked into our bedroom and flipped on the lights with more force than necessary. The sudden brightness flooded the room, causing Lisa to stir and blink in confusion at the unexpected wake-up call. "Get up," I said, my voice deadly calm despite the rage coursing through my veins. Lisa stirred, blinking against the harsh light and looking at me with sleepy confusion. "David, what's wrong? What time is it?" Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and played the audio clip I had saved from the security footage. Her own voice filled our bedroom, slurred slightly from wine but crystal clear in its brutal honesty. "I love what he represents. I love the security. I love not worrying about money." I watched as her face went completely white, the blood draining from her cheeks as she realized exactly what she was hearing. The sleepy confusion was instantly replaced by panic and the dawning horror of someone who had just been caught in their most private moment of honesty. "David, I can explain," she started, sitting up quickly and reaching toward me. "Shut up," I said, cutting her off with a sharpness that made her flinch. "Just shut the fuck up and listen to the rest of it." I played another clip, her voice continuing with that same casual brutality. "I chose financial security over passion. Now I'm trapped with a man who makes love to me like he's following instructions from a manual." "You feel trapped?" I asked, my voice maintaining that same deadly calm that was somehow more terrifying than if I had been screaming. "Well, congratulations, Lisa. You're officially free." "David, please, I can explain," she said again, desperation creeping into her voice as she scrambled out of bed. "It's not what it sounds like. I was just venting to Chloe. I didn't mean—" "Explain what exactly?" I interrupted, my composure finally cracking as my voice rose. "Explain that you've been using me for the past 2.5 years? That every time you said you loved me, you were lying through your teeth? That I've been nothing more than your personal ATM with benefits?" I started pulling her clothes from our shared closet and throwing them onto the bed. "Pack your shit. You're out, tonight." "Where am I supposed to go?" Lisa asked, tears starting to stream down her face as the reality of the situation hit her. "David, please, we can work through this. Couples therapy, anything." "I don't give a fuck where you go." I said, continuing to throw her belongings into the suitcase I had pulled from under the bed. Call Jake. Maybe he can afford you now, assuming he's learned how to pay his own rent. The tears were coming harder now, and she looked genuinely devastated. But I felt nothing except the cold satisfaction of finally having the upper hand. David, I do care about you. I know this sounds terrible, but… No, you don't care about me, I said, stopping my frantic packing to look directly at her. You care about my bank account. You care about the lifestyle I provide. You care about not having to worry about money, but you don't care about me as a person. I grabbed my keys from the dresser, feeling the weight of everything that had just been destroyed between us. You want to know the really fucked up part? I said, turning back to face her as she sat there crying on our bed surrounded by her scattered belongings. I was going to propose to you at New Year's. Had the whole thing planned out. The perfect ring picked out from Cartier, the romantic dinner reservation, the speech I'd been practicing. I had $18,000 saved up in a separate account for your perfect emerald cut engagement ring. Her face crumpled completely at this revelation, and she let out a sob that might have moved me if I hadn't just heard her true feelings about our entire relationship. David, you know what else is completely fucked up? I continued, my voice gaining momentum as the full scope of her betrayal became clear. If you had just told me you wanted me to be more aggressive in bed, I would have done it. If you had said you needed more excitement, more passion, we could have worked on it together, but you chose to lie instead. I didn't know how to, Lisa began, but I cut her off before she could finish the excuse. Bullshit, I said sharply. You knew exactly how to tell your sister all about it in graphic detail. You knew exactly how to complain about our sex life to everyone except the one person who could actually do something about it. You just didn't respect me enough to be honest with me. I started throwing more of her clothes into the suitcase, my movements sharp and angry. 2.5 years you complained about our sex life to your friends, probably laughed about how boring I was in bed, how predictable and safe I was. 2.5 years you sat there fantasizing about Jake tying you up while I tried to show you how much I loved you. David, please, Lisa said again, her voice breaking as she watched me systematically remove every trace of her from our bedroom. Please, we can fix this. I'll be honest with you about everything. We can go to therapy. We can work on the intimacy issues. Please what? I snapped, whirling around to face her. Please keep letting you use me? Please keep being your fucking security blanket while you fantasize about someone else? Please keep pretending that what we had was real when you've just admitted it was all a calculated business decision on your part? I zipped up the suitcase with more force than necessary and set it on the floor beside the bed. You have until Monday to get the rest of your shit out. I'm changing the locks on Tuesday morning. Where am I supposed to go? Lisa asked again, and this time there was genuine panic in her voice as the reality of her situation began to sink in. I can't afford this apartment on my own. I don't have anywhere else to stay. That's your problem now, I said, heading toward the bedroom door. You should have thought about that before you decided to settle for the boring guy with money while complaining about him behind his back. David, wait, Lisa called out, scrambling off the bed to follow me. I stopped and looked back at her one final time, taking in her tear-stained face and desperate expression. 2.5 years, I said quietly. 2.5 years I thought we were building something real together. Turns out I was just your fucking security blanket. With that, I walked out of the bedroom and slammed the door behind me, leaving her to figure out how to rebuild the life she had just destroyed with her own words. I moved in with Chloe that Monday, hauling my suitcases up to her spare bedroom while she made pointed comments about finally seeing David's true colors. She didn't understand what had really happened, and I wasn't about to explain the full scope of my own responsibility in the destruction of my relationship. The truth was, nobody understood. I wasn't some gold-digging monster who had set out to manipulate an innocent man. I was a practical woman who had made what seemed like a reasonable choice at the time, choosing stability and security over uncertainty and financial stress. That choice had just happened to blow up spectacularly in my face when my private thoughts were exposed. The first few weeks after the breakup felt like a strange kind of freedom. I could stay out late without texting constant updates about my whereabouts. I could flirt with attractive men at bars without feeling guilty. I could finally live without someone analyzing my every move like it was evidence in a legal case, without someone constantly planning our future trajectory down to the smallest detail. Chloe took me out to celebrate what she called my liberation from David's controlling tendencies. For a brief moment, I actually thought maybe this was exactly what I needed. A chance to rediscover who I was outside of that suffocating relationship. But reality hit fast and hard when I tried to get back into the dating scene. The modern dating landscape was a brutal wake-up call that reminded me exactly why I had chosen David in the first place. Let's split this, Derek said casually when our dinner bill arrived at the trendy bistro he had suggested for our first date. The tab was $84. Not exactly an astronomical amount, but apparently enough to make this marketing executive with his designer watch and expensive cologne think twice about covering it himself. I stared at him for a moment, wondering when men had stopped trying to impress women they supposedly wanted to sleep with. When David took me out, he would order wine that cost more than this entire meal without even glancing at the price. "Oh, okay," I said, pulling out my credit card with what I hoped looked like a genuine smile rather than the forced grimace it actually was. Derek didn't call again, and neither did Brandon, the graphic designer who suggested we hang out at his place for our second date instead of going anywhere that required him to spend actual money. Or Kevin, the software developer who had the audacity to ask me to Venmo him for half the Uber fare after our hookup. As if splitting a 12-month ride was a reasonable expense to burden me with after mediocre sex in his studio apartment. "Welcome to dating in your 20s when you're not being subsidized by a sugar daddy," Chloe said with a smirk when I complained about my third consecutive Netflix and chill invitation from yet another man who apparently thought his company was payment enough for an evening. "He wasn't a sugar daddy," I snapped, though even as the words left my mouth, I could hear how defensive and unconvincing they sounded. "He was my boyfriend who happened to be financially generous and knew how to treat a woman properly." But even as I defended David to Chloe, I knew she was right about the current state of dating. These men weren't interested in building anything meaningful or lasting. They wanted easy access to sex with minimal emotional or financial investment on their part. At least David had respected me enough to take me to actual restaurants and pay for proper dates. After 2 months of disappointing encounters with men who thought buying a drink entitled them to immediate sex and increasingly expensive nights out that I had to fund myself, I started missing aspects of David that I never thought I would miss. I missed the way he would have fresh espresso waiting for me in the morning, perfectly prepared to my exact specifications. I missed how he would remember details about my work stress and actually ask thoughtful questions about my difficult clients. I missed the security of knowing that someone genuinely gave a damn about how my day had gone, someone who wanted to hear about both my successes and my frustrations. Most of all, I missed the financial stability that had allowed me to focus on my career and personal growth instead of constantly worrying about money. Living with Chloe meant splitting higher rent, and covering my own entertainment expenses was eating through my savings faster than I had anticipated. After weeks of internal debate and growing desperation, I decided to reach out to David. Maybe we had both been too hasty in our reactions. Maybe there was still a chance to salvage what we had built together, even if it meant swallowing my pride and admitting that I had made a terrible mistake. "I've been thinking about us," I texted him one Friday evening, staring at my phone for 20 minutes before finally hitting send. Maybe we were too hasty in how everything ended. We could try couples therapy, work through our communication issues. His response came 4 hours later, just as I was starting to hope that maybe he was seriously considering my suggestion. The message was brutally simple. No. That was it. Just no. Not, "I need time to think about it," or "maybe we can talk." Just a flat, unequivocal rejection that left no room for negotiation or hope. I tried again the following week, suggesting we meet for coffee to talk like adults who had shared 2.5 years of their lives together. This time he didn't even respond, just left me on read, which somehow felt even worse than his curt rejection. By December, I was getting genuinely desperate. I had blown through most of my savings covering Chloe's higher rent and my own living expenses. The dating scene continued to be a wasteland of men who thought splitting a $20 appetizer was a reasonable way to show romantic interest. Meanwhile, I kept seeing David around town, at the upscale restaurants I could no longer afford, looking confident and completely unaffected by our breakup. He appeared to be thriving without me, which was both infuriating and deeply unsettling. I had expected him to be devastated, maybe even come crawling back eventually. Instead, he looked like a man who had dodged a bullet and was grateful for the narrow escape. The final straw came at our mutual friend Rachel's New Year's Eve party in January. I had been dreading social events where David might appear, but I couldn't hide from our entire social circle forever. When I walked into Rachel's beautifully decorated apartment and immediately spotted him across the room, looking infuriatingly successful in his expensive Armani suit, something inside me snapped. He had been ignoring my attempts to make eye contact all evening, chatting easily with friends who used to be our friends, acting like nothing significant had happened. Like he hadn't completely destroyed my life over one private conversation with my sister. "You know what your problem is, David?" I said, loud enough for everyone in the immediate vicinity to hear as I cornered him by the bar. The alcohol I had been drinking all evening to numb my humiliation finally gave me the courage to confront him directly. He looked at me with those cold, analytical eyes that I had once found attractive, but now secretly despised. "You're boring," I continued, my voice carrying across Rachel's living room. "You're predictable. You think throwing money around makes you interesting, but it doesn't. You're just a walking ATM with no real personality. Are you done? David asked, his voice maintaining that same infuriating calm that had always made me feel like he was analyzing me rather than actually listening to me. No, I'm not done, I said, emboldened by the attention I was drawing from our mutual friends. You're the kind of man who has to buy affection because you can't inspire it naturally. That's why you're here alone while I'm having the time of my life being free from your suffocating control. The time of your life? David asked. And there was something in his tone that should have warned me to stop, but I was too drunk and too angry to pay attention to the danger signs. Is that what you call texting me every week, begging to get back together? I felt the blood drain from my face as several people around us stopped their conversations to listen. My carefully constructed narrative about being liberated and happy was crumbling in real time, and David was systematically exposing my desperation in front of everyone we knew. I wasn't begging, I started, but my voice sounded weak and unconvincing even to my own ears. You were begging, David said calmly, and then he did something that completely destroyed what was left of my dignity. He pulled out his phone with deliberate slowness, like he was about to play his trump card. Remember that conversation with Chloe that ended our relationship? He said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet room. I still have the audio. The blood drained completely from my face as the full horror of what he was about to do hit me. David, don't! I started, reaching for his phone, but it was too late. He was already pressing play, and my own voice filled Rachel's living room, slurred from wine and brutally honest in a way that I had never intended for anyone else to hear. I love what he represents. I love the security. I love not worrying about money. Then Chloe's voice came through the phone speaker. But do you love him? And my own voice again, sealing my social death warrant. I love what he represents. The silence in the room was absolutely deafening. I could feel everyone staring at me. Rachel looked horrified. Ryan was shaking his head in disgust, and even strangers at the party had stopped their conversations to listen to my humiliation being broadcast for everyone to hear. David skipped ahead in the recording, and my voice continued with devastating clarity. I chose financial security over passion. Now I'm trapped with a man who makes love to me like he's following instructions from a manual. Should I play the part where you describe your ex in bed? David asked quietly, his finger hovering over his phone. Or maybe the part where you say you're considering having an affair when you get bored enough? Stop, I whispered, tears streaming down my face as I realized that my reputation, my social circle, and what was left of my dignity were being destroyed in real time. Please stop. David put his phone away and looked at me with something that might have been pity if there had been any warmth left in his eyes. Leave me alone, Lisa. Find some other guy to use for rent money. He walked away, leaving me standing there with a dozen people staring at me like I was some kind of monster they had just discovered in their midst. Within a week, everyone in our social circle knew exactly why we had broken up. The story spread like wildfire through our group of friends, acquaintances, and professional contacts. I became known as the girl who used her boyfriend for financial security and got caught complaining about it on a security camera recording. The narrative was simple and devastating. I was a calculating woman who had manipulated a good man for his money while secretly despising him and planning to cheat on him. Every detail of that private conversation with Chloe was dissected and shared, turning my moment of vulnerable honesty into proof of my moral bankruptcy. People I had considered friends suddenly became distant and cold. Invitations to social events stopped coming. Former colleagues who had once been friendly now treated me with barely concealed disgust. The professional networking events that had been crucial for building my event planning business became minefields of whispered conversations and judgmental stares. 6 months later, I'm still living with Chloe in her cramped apartment, still struggling to make ends meet on my reduced income, and still completely alone. The dating apps that had seemed so promising initially have become a source of constant disappointment and financial drain. The men I meet either can't afford to take me anywhere decent, or they've heard the story about what happened with David and see me as an easy target for casual sex without any real investment. Meanwhile, David has moved on with his life in a way that makes my continued struggles even more painful to witness. I heard through the gossip network that he had started dating someone new, a doctor who apparently adores him and treats him with the genuine affection I had never been able to provide. They look happy together in the social media photos that occasionally appear in my feed, attending the same upscale restaurants and charity events that David used to take me to. The doctor is beautiful, successful in her own right, and from what I can tell, genuinely attracted to David rather than just his bank account. She represents everything I should have been but wasn't. A woman who could appreciate both David's stability and his personality, who could build a real partnership based on mutual respect and authentic feelings. Watching them together from a distance has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself and my choices. I had convinced myself that settling for security was a practical, mature decision that any smart woman would make. But seeing David with someone who actually loves him for who he is rather than what he provides has made me realize that I had been the problem all along. I had been so focused on finding financial stability that I had forgotten to consider whether I was capable of genuine love and partnership. I had treated our relationship like a business transaction, and when David discovered the truth, he had simply canceled the contract and moved on to find a better partner. The most painful part of this entire experience is learning that settling for security isn't nearly as shameful as having everyone know that you did it. The social humiliation of being exposed as someone who used a good man for money has been far worse than any financial struggles I'm experiencing now. I've become a cautionary tale that people share when warning their friends about dating women who seem more interested in lifestyle than love. Now, as I sit in Chloe's spare bedroom eating ramen noodles and scrolling through job listings, I'm forced to acknowledge that my practical choice to prioritize security over passion wasn't just morally questionable, it was also incredibly stupid. I gave up the chance for genuine happiness and authentic connection in exchange for temporary financial comfort, and now I have neither security nor love.